All right, thank you. There are 74 of us here, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Good morning. Welcome to the Essential Services Commission's information session about our review of the Energy Retail Code of Practice. If we could please go to the next slide. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands wherever you're joining us from today. For me, it's the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation here in Naarm, Melbourne. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present, and to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may be with us today. My name's Nathan Zhivov. I'm the Executive Director of the Energy Division here at the Essential Services Commission. Today, I have a number of members of our energy reform team supporting me. They are leading this review into the Energy Retail Code of Practice. Some of them will be presenting to you today after my introduction. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to meet with us, and I really welcome your participation. I hope that this is a good session for you, but also we really want to hear your views. This is a very important project to us. The Energy Retail Code of Practice sets out the key consumer protections for Victorian energy consumers. It already contains a series of minimum standards for retailers to provide payment assistance, and that's the first of its kind in Australia through the Payment Difficulty Framework. It was also the first code of practice or series of protections to support customers affected by family violence. It has a strong pricing, marketing and contract protections that were reforms coming out of the bipartisan review into energy markets in 2018. Many of these protections are unique to Victoria, with best offer messaging implemented in other states from September last year. We're keen to hear your perspectives on how the code is working, how it can be clarified to deliver outcomes we set out to deliver. We're also open to hearing your ideas to maintain the strong protections we have in Victoria. I hope this session helps with your submissions and in the many conversations we'll be having with you over the coming months. Our job as a regulator is to put the right settings in the market that deliver consumer outcomes. This includes weighing up the costs and benefits of potential ideas, but we can only do that if we have the information and evidence for change. So anything that can help us with that through your submission is something that we would welcome. Before I pass to our staff to start providing some information on the more specifics, I just want to run through some of the more logistical information about today, some housekeeping, if you will. So first of all, you will have noticed that this session is being recorded and it may be shared on our website to help others who couldn't make it to this session today. After the presentations, there will be time for questions, and we hope that you provide the questions to us and we look forward to answering them. If you do have any questions or comments throughout today's discussion, could you please put them in the chat Q&A function, and we'll endeavour to respond to them during the question time. Otherwise, please use the raise hand function in Teams during the Q&A time and we'll try to get to you. Just to minimise background noise and to make sure that everybody can hear one another, could we ask you to please keep yourself on mute unless you're speaking? And we'll try to get around to as many questions as we can today. We're also open to meeting with stakeholders individually, and we can respond to queries via email. So if you prefer to submit your queries via email, can you please submit them via energyreform@esc.vic.gov.au. So once again, thank you for joining us. And with that introduction out of the way, I'd like to hand over to Aaron and Gareth to take us through the first session. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nathan, and good morning, everyone. My name is Gareth Scott. I'm an acting regulatory reform manager at the Commission in our Energy Division here, and I'd like to echo Nathan's thanks for your time this morning and joining us to hear about the project and hopefully learn a little bit more about the focus of the review. So the purpose of today, as Nathan has touched on, is firstly to really highlight the key issues that we've identified in the current version of the Energy Retail Code of Practice. ERCOP is often referred to. You may hear that phrase throughout this morning, and really hoping to help your understanding. If you wish to put any feedback or submissions through to us on the issues and the potential reforms that we've put in this issues paper that we have out at the moment. So we're hoping to really raise awareness, draw your attention to issues in that consultation paper, and would like to support you in knowing how to make comments and provide feedback to us if you wish to. I will also give an overview of the project, include some approximate timelines, how to get involved in providing your views. At the end, as Nathan mentioned, we'll have time for a Q&A. We'll answer your questions to the best of our ability. We won't solve any issues today, but we do hope to provide you with enough information and pique your interest in issues that you may wish to sort of further comment on as part of this consultation process. So I'll just say briefly who we are. As an organisation, some of you may be very familiar with us, some of you may not be familiar with us. We're an independent regulator that promotes the long-term interests of Victorian consumers. That's with respect to the price, quality and reliability of essential services. When we're talking about essential services, we regulate Victoria's energy, water, transport sectors and administer the rate capping system for the local government sector. We also regulate the VEU program, which is the Victorian Energy Upgrades program that aims to reduce greenhouse gases by making energy efficient improvements more affordable for consumers. Here today, we're looking at the Energy Retail Code of Practice, looking at our work in energy and consumer protection, and talking through the project and the consultation we have out at the moment. I'll give a little project background, and in the next slide or so, we'll talk about the timelines approximate timelines we're working to, and I'll give a very quick overview of the 4 themes that we've put out in the paper to sort of help signpost the presentation today, and if you look at the issues paper to help navigate that a bit. The ERCOP, the Energy Retail Code of Practice, is a legislative instrument, which means the rules and obligations that are set out in the code are legally enforceable by the Commission. The code was reviewed back in 2021. It was more of an administrative review. This current review that we're at the beginning of now is intended to be fuller, look to address a number of issues, and the sorts of issues that we have in the issues paper, they've arisen through either sort of broader changes elsewhere in energy retail regulation that we're aware of, best practice emerging, feedback from consumers, retailers, etc., their experiences as an energy retailer or as a consumer, good and bad. So today, or the purpose of the ERCOP broadly is to, as part of our function as a commission, is to address sort of key potential or actual harms to Victorian consumers, and doing that in a proportionate way, clarifying or updating obligations that are either sort of unclear or inconsistent, and some of the sort of issues and things that you'll see today or have read in the paper kind of fall under sort of more simple fix-ups in the code, where perhaps the code is not consistent with itself, or is not consistent with other codes, or is just has some grey areas that are unclear that need to be addressed. And then part of our objectives of reviewing the ERCOP is to advance the ESC's Getting to Fair strategy, which is about supporting consumers who experience vulnerability. So looking at improvement and protections where they are further required. So our approach, our timeline that we're looking to, the bottom diagram is probably a useful part to focus on. There's a few bullet points on this slide, but we're at that left-hand side of the diagram at the moment. Our process broadly for projects, code reviews, begin with an issues paper, which is where we are now, collecting together what we think are the key issues that need to be looked at as part of our review process. We're at consultation mode on that issues paper at the moment, and that will run till the 19th of July. And then we move into a sort of period of understanding the feedback that we've been given, looking at options, testing options with stakeholders, and we're looking to understand what are the potential impacts that could go with different options to address the issues that we're out for consultation on at the moment. And that'll come together in a document that we call the Regulatory Impact Statement. Sometimes draft decision is a similar concept that comes with a draft code as well. And we're aiming to release that by sort of early 2025. that's a public consultation step as well. Remain open for consultation and conversations and meetings throughout the project, but that is a key public consultation step on a draft, basically. And then looking at a timeline at the moment of the middle of next year, 2025, and roughly looking at late end 2025 for those that amended code to come into effect. So those timelines are approximate and will partly depend on sort of volume, the nature and the complexity of feedbacks and potential reforms that we're looking at. So before I pass to some other members of the team, so we're joined by a few members of the team to present on one of these 4 themes. I'll just give a very quick overview. So we're looking at presenting, for the interest of time today, the issues paper has more detail within it, but we've parceled up the different topics and issues into these 4 themes here. And today we'll give an overview of sort of 3 or so issues per theme. And if you'd like to see more detail, I encourage you, if you're interested, to look at that issue in our issues paper, which is set out in a similar structure. So we've got protections for consumers experiencing vulnerability. That might be about consumers experiencing family violence and protections for those groups or hardship. Supporting choices of energy consumers, and there's some gas disconnection and abolishment aspects to that. Pricing and contract protections, and general code of practice updates and other changes. So a bit of a MISC category at the end that didn't easily fall into the other 3, but there's some proposed changes in there as well. I'm going to pass to Reid now, who's going to take us through that first theme of protections for consumers experiencing vulnerability. Thanks, Reid.
Thank you, Gareth. And hi, everyone. My name is Reid, and I'm a regulatory analyst in the Reform team. And I'll be taking us through the next 3 slides and presenting an overview on the theme of protections for consumers experiencing vulnerability. There are 4 core areas of reform attached to this theme, which I will take you through by firstly outlining the objective of the proposed reform and briefly what those potential reforms are as reflected in our issues paper open for consultation. So just next slide, please. Thank you. So currently, and our first sort of area is strengthening family violence protections. So currently the code requires retailers to provide assistance to customers who may be affected by family violence and includes minimum standards relating to training, account security, customer service, debt management, and external support for customers. So retailers are required to develop family violence policies and maintain records demonstrating compliance with family violence obligations. And really the underlying purpose of these obligations is to ensure that retailers provide customers safe, supportive, and flexible family violence assistance when managing their personal and financial security. So we are also exploring options to encourage better practice across retailers, including our Safety by Design partnership to support energy and water consumers who may be experiencing family violence. We are also aware of developments progressed by the Australian Energy Market Commission, where new rules were introduced to apply in other states covered by the National Energy Retail Rules. And these rules were aimed to align with protections that are already in place in Victoria. So there is some level of consistency in consumer protections with other states and territories. Despite this alignment, we believe there may still be opportunity to review the Energy Retail Code and consider new or amending obligations. So given this, we are proposing to review our existing rules to take into account advancements in other jurisdictions and sectors, but really only to the extent that changes will strengthen the existing Victorian protections. So this brings us to some of our potential reforms, and we're considering potential amendments to the existing family violence obligations, which will include comparing family violence protections under the National Energy Retail Rules and family violence requirements under the National Energy Retail Rules that may strengthen the Victorian rules may include, as is on the screen, additional requirements on businesses in order to avoid repeated disclosures of a customer's experience of family violence, expanding the definition of family violence to include carers and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander kinship relationships, expanding current debt management rules in the code so they apply to retailers when transferring debts to third-party debt collectors, reviewing existing account security rules in the code of practice to safeguard an affected customer's personal information, and ensuring the disclosure of family violence status does not adversely impact their supply of energy. Just next slide, please. So this brings us to the second matter, which is the payment difficulty framework training requirements. And just to sort of briefly set the scene here, the payment difficulty framework came into effect on the beginning of 2019, and it was really introduced as a set of rules in the code of practice in response to increasing numbers of customer disconnections for being in energy areas. And so with cost of living pressures mounting, evidence suggests that more energy customers experiencing vulnerability are accessing tailored assistance, with on average 65,000 electricity customers and 54,000 gas customers receiving support from their retailers per month in 2022-2023. So the purpose of this framework is really to help customers who may be struggling to pay their bills and ensures fair treatment, prevent unauthorized disconnections, and serves to promote positive outcomes for consumers. And the framework entitles customers anticipating or experiencing payment difficulty to minimum standards of assistance. And the code currently requires retailers to provide family violence training, and for this training to address the nature and consequences of family violence, the application of the retailer's family violence policy, and how to identify affected customers and how to engage appropriately and effectively with those affected customers. So our objective is a simple one, really. It's to strengthening payment difficulty framework training requirements to better support consumers who may be experiencing vulnerability. And some potential changes may include requiring retailer customer service staff to be appropriately trained to assist customers experiencing different vulnerability or hardship issues, not just family violence matters. And extending the framework's training requirements to include customers experiencing vulnerability or financial hardship. Just next slide, please. So this brings us to the next matter, which is the accessibility of utility relief grants or URGs information. So utility relief grants supports eligible residential customers who may be homeowners or renters pay their overdue bill due to a temporary financial crisis in order to assist reducing utility debt and building financial capability. And just to sort of be clear, the Commission does not set the URG scheme or who may be eligible to receiving the grant, as it is administered by the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing. But under the URG scheme, a customer in debt is entitled to minimum standards of flexible and practical assistance, such as tailored assistance. So the findings in our March Victorian Energy Market Report saw an increasing number of customer requesting and receiving URGs throughout July to December 2023, compared to the same period in 2022. So the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing has also approved more URGs applications during that same period in 2023. Despite these increasing numbers of URGs payments being granted, we've heard from consumer advocates some concerns that may indicate the current obligations may not be delivering the expected outcomes for consumers. And whilst we acknowledge that some concerns are outside our regulatory remit, they do include the timeliness of applications, the grant amounts, lack of awareness of URGs itself, and sort of complicated URGs application processes. So the code already includes obligations for retailers to provide customers with specific advice regarding their URGs and concessions available to residential customers, and provide practical assistance to complete and lodge an URGs application. So we're seeking stakeholder feedback on whether these URGs obligations are being implemented as intended, or if any guidance could be provided. We're also interested in receiving feedback on whether there are any practical barriers for customers accessing ERGs to judge whether further reforms are needed. Just next slide, please. So this is the last sort of area of which is concerned with the assistance and information on energy efficiency. So currently the code requires a retailer to provide practical assistance to help a residential customer facing financial hardship to lower their energy costs. Lowering energy usage and the adoption of energy efficiency appliances can support a customer to reduce energy costs. High energy usage is a key driver of high electricity bills for housing receiving payment difficulty support, and lowering energy usage and the adoption of energy efficiency appliances can support customers to reduce their energy costs. And some of our recent findings has shown that many customers who receive payment difficulty support are in households that consume more energy from the grid than other households. And from 2018 to 2022, for example, households on payment difficulty assistance used approximately 27 to 34% more electricity than households who weren't receiving payment difficulty support. In our payment difficulty framework implementation review, improving the appropriateness and timing of payment assistance provided by retailers about how to lower energy usage and costs was of key importance. In order to avoid a situation whereby a customer continues to build debt that they may not be able to escape from, it's crucial that there is support available for these customers to reduce their consumption through better energy efficiency measures. So given this context, our objective is to improve how retailers provide tailored energy efficiency information and practical assistance to customers to assist in reducing their energy usage. Potential reforms we're considering includes improving the current obligations to provide customers practical assistance and linking retailers with existing energy efficiency programs, such as the Victorian Energy Upgrades Program. So worth noting that we are mindful of circumstances where retailers may not be best placed to offer energy efficiency advice, so we encourage feedback on any potential barriers retailers may face in sharing such advice. Thank you. That brings me to the end of this theme of protections for consumers experiencing vulnerability. I'll now be handing over to Natalie, who will be taking us through the next theme on supporting the choices of energy consumers. Thank you.
Thank you, Reid, and hello, everyone. As Reid said, I'm Nat, and I'm also an analyst in energy reform. So I'm here to talk to you about the theme of supporting the choices of energy consumers. Just a little reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A box of this presentation, and we will answer them at the end or get back to you by email if we need to. Now, firstly, we're looking to align gas disconnection and abolishments with the new policy context in Australia. For example, in June 2023, the AER took a decision to lower the fees gas distributors can charge for the abolishment of gas connections. And we introduced definitions for disconnection and abolishment, among other things, in our gas distribution code of practice. We also note that AEMO is forecasting a drop in gas demand and that many retailers and governments are offering incentives for customers and consumers to electrify. Despite this and other policy changes, we've found that a customer who wishes to permanently disconnect from the gas network lacks clear information about the options, the charges, the timeframes, and the processes for requesting disconnections or abolishments. So we are considering new requirements for retailers to provide information to customers who want to disconnect. And so these could include rules clarifying timeframes, procedures, charges, and billing arrangements. We're also considering requirements for retailers to publish information about the types of gas that might be supplied to customers. The second topic in this theme is bill information requirements. Now, we consider that energy bills should support consumers to understand where and how they use energy, the cost breakdowns, and how to access support and best offers. As a result, we're assessing whether the information required on energy bills is sufficiently easy to understand and if it facilitates customer engagement as it's intended to. So to do this in the issues paper, we've presented 3 potential options, or I suppose maybe 3.5 options for improving bill information. So the first and the half is the alignment with AER's Better Bills guideline. So the Better Bills guideline is mainly about the positioning and prioritisation of information on energy bills, which could help in maximising awareness of available government support, such as energy concessions. So we could either fully or partially adopt this. So partially would be the half, I guess. The second is the tweaking of rules to include ombuds details on the bill. So in our case, obviously it's EWOV. For example, introducing a requirement to prominently display details on how to contact EWOV as an extension of the existing obligation to include a telephone number for complaints. And the third is addressing bill communication requirements. So we've found that many retailers now send bills with a summary and a payment link in an email. And we've heard of an increase in reported cases where consumers are not aware or physically don't see best offer messaging as it's not in the email text. We think that this creates an additional barrier to accessing best offers, and as such, we may seek to review not only the bill information requirements, but requirements on the transmission of bills as well. Like all of our reforms, we obviously look at the cost of implementation and the benefit to consumers to find a solution that's proportionate. Could we change slides, Julia? Thank you. Thirdly, we intend to review how best offer messaging is presented on customer bills as part of the previously mentioned bill information requirements. We do this because we think there are additional areas we could address to support improved accessibility and availability of best offers. The current requirement is that energy retailers must tell customers how much they could save by switching to the best energy plan they offer, and this best energy offer is based on how much energy a customer has used over the past year. As context, we've noticed that high bill cases surged 64% compared to the same quarter last year. So now it's more than ever, consumers need support ensuring they're on the most affordable plan to suit their circumstances. So it's critical that clear, readily available best offer messaging is reiterated through multiple channels, and we're considering 4 reforms in relation to this. The first is the availability of best offers. So we've heard of incidences where best offers are unavailable not long after the issuing of a bill. So this is particularly after annual price increases. So this can lead to mixed messages and a reduced trust in the market. Secondly, we don't want plans with restricted access, such as invitation-only plans, being considered in best offer messaging. So this undermines the purpose of best offers, being the cheapest generally available offer for the energy retailer. Third is discounts for bundled electricity and gas services. So these are discounts available to customers who bundle their electricity and gas with one provider. However, deemed best offers must be determined without including discounts. So we propose to clarify that discounts for bundled plans should not apply to deemed best offers. And the fourth is best offer terms and conditions. Government program providers note that terms and conditions involved in switching to best offer are often long and confusing, especially for public housing residents. This has the effect of undermining confidence in the switching process. So we would seek to clarify the need for simple, accessible language when communicating best offers across all platforms. So again, the likely benefits that are also expected to be proportionate to the implementation costs that a retailer might incur. Now, the fourth topic is the accuracy of data provided to the Victorian Energy Compare website to support its objective of providing accessible and trusted information to energy consumers. This topic includes two proposed reforms. The first is the standardisation of terms on fact sheets and websites such as discount, incentive, one-off rebate, one-off credit and sign-up credit. We also propose to prescribe timeframes for the removal of out-of-date information from retailers' websites and the Victorian Energy Compare website. Here we're proposing that expired offers are removed within 1 day. In doing this, though, we would expect that retailers upload new fact sheets and display other relevant information prominently, because we think that this will go a long way to addressing the issue of best offers being available at the time a consumer requests them. Now, of course, these proposed definitions and timeframes will be guided by stakeholder feedback, like all of our reforms. So thank you very much for listening, and I will now hand over to Will.
Thanks, Nat. Hi, everyone. I'm Will, also a regulatory analyst in the reforms team, and I'll be taking you all through the pricing and contract protections part of the presentation. So in the pricing and contract protections part of the code, we're aiming to address the issues impacting contract transparency, pricing, and developing more customer trust in the market. The issues paper goes into a little bit more detail on the potential improvements we're looking to make in the code, but today we're just going to go over 3 topics. The first 2 topics relate to clarifying unclear definitions in the code, and the last slide relates to clarifying the term additional retail charges in the contract terms and conditions. So this first term that we're aiming to clarify is pay by date. The objective of defining this term is to reduce confusion about the obligations on a retailer regarding issuing reminder notices when a customer enters a payment agreement. We also want to reduce the confusion from customers getting payment information multiple times from retailers because of the definition of pay by date. We consider that the code could be a little bit clearer around the obligations for when an information notice can be given. For example, when a customer fails to make a payment under a revised payment arrangement or after a payment arrangement ends. Another issue relates to when a retailer needs to provide information about assistance to a customer. So sometimes a customer may receive information notices about payments and payment assistance multiple times from a retailer. This is because a retailer may want to satisfy the obligations to provide information about assistance to the customer. Customers, as a result, may end up becoming confused by receiving the same information multiple times. By defining pay by date, we aim to clarify when reminder notices and information about tailored assistance should be provided. We're also considering giving retailers the option to tailor communications to customers depending on their individual circumstances. So this next topic relates to the term arranging a disconnection. Currently, there is an inconsistent understanding of the term arrange a disconnection, which has in the past resulted in wrongful disconnections, and our main objective is to avoid these wrongful disconnections. Just an example of misunderstanding around this term, a retailer might consider raising a service order to disconnect as arranging a disconnection, However, within the time between raising the service order and the disconnection happening, the customer could organize a payment plan with the retailer to repay the debt. And if the retailer doesn't cancel the service order, the customer might be wrongfully disconnected as a result. The retailer would be complying with the existing rules in our code as it's met the disconnection requirements before issuing the disconnection request. There is a little bit more detail on this example in the issues paper. Additionally, when a customer has arranged a payment plan and they're compliant with their payment plan, disconnections are not intended. We expect disconnections to be a last resort measure for non-payment, and we intend to address this issue through reform. One of the reforms we're considering is replacing the term arrange a disconnection with the term disconnect, which should clarify that retailers will need to comply with disconnection obligations after raising a disconnection order. Alternatively, we can separately clarify that once a customer seeks or receives payment assistance and is complying with the relevant terms, any service orders for disconnection must be cancelled. So this next slide relates to the disclosure of additional retail charges in the terms and conditions. The code allows for retailers to impose additional retail charges on a customer. An example of an additional retail charge would be a fee for a disconnection from gas. Since customers might not be aware of these additional retail charges, we're considering reforming the code to require retailers to include these additional retail charges in the market retail contracts or the exempt person arrangements. This would allow customers to better understand their energy bills. To support this, we're also considering requiring retailers to provide information about these specific retail charges to help customers get a better understanding of their energy bills. For these issues in the code, we're seeking feedback about whether you've had any problematic experiences with these terms and whether you might think creating a definition would be the best way to solve these issues, or if there are any other things we need to consider. Now I'll pass on to Gareth for the general amendment segment of the presentation.
Thanks, Will. Hello again, everyone. This is the final theme of the issues. I'll share 3 slides and then some next steps, and we'll open up to questions that have come through the Q&A or hands raised during that section at the end. This is a more general theme, and I think it has a mix of some potential reforms that are probably more straightforward in nature, that we anticipate aren't likely to cause particular issues, though we're obviously very open if we think something is a straightforward fix-up or providing clarity, but you foresee any sort of unintended consequences. That's obviously very important feedback as well. Some of these will be a little bit more involved and require more thought as well. So I'll move to our first slide onto this general theme. And firstly, we have protections for embedded network customers. And there are 2 aspects really on this slide that we've put under this topic. The first point there relates to some more administrative type changes to align parts of the Code of Practice to some relevant parts in what's called the General Exemption Order 2022, sorry. And I'll say a little more on that in a moment, but that's our first point, is alignment to these definitions in this order that's been updated. And then the second point there relates to looking at strengthening protections for embedded network customers, ensuring that those protections are consistent between embedded network customers, whether they buy electricity from licensed or exempt sellers. And at the moment, there are some differences in protections between the two. So just going back to that first potential reform at the top, this is really to align some aspects of the code that have been updated or are due to be updated by that General Exemption Order 2022. So the code currently contains sort of 2 aspects that relate to a previous order, 2017, related to Schedule 5, which has some categories of activities for exempt persons. There were some very minor amendments made to that. Currently reflects the older order from 2017, and we would propose to align that so that those definitions are updated by the 2022 order. There's also some parts in Schedule 6 of the code which relate to, explicit informed consent. Previous definitions set out in the 2017 order, updated by the 2022 order. Again, very minor amendment which doesn't change the substance or materially the definition of that. So we consider they're likely to be quite straightforward sort of alignments. And some other parts to strengthening safeguards for embedded network customers are about, as I mentioned just earlier, aligning protections for those customers that buy from exempt sellers and licensed sellers. And part of this is about whether you're buying from a licensed retailer or an exempt seller and you're in an embedded network, that you're suitably protected in either case. So similarly, we're looking at embedded network customers to increase protections for consumers experiencing vulnerability, considering, and it's in our issues paper, considering the extending the family violence protections that are already set out in the Code of Practice, but extending those to embedded network customers. So currently, obligations related to assistance for customers affected by family violence don't apply to an exempt person. So while there are some protections in place to prevent disconnection of utilities for family violence affected customers, there may be more opportunity to actually strengthen those and extend those safeguards further to those customers. And finally, just on this aspect, we're considering to extend there's a current bill change alert requirement set out in the code, and we're considering extending that so that it also covers embedded network customers. So under the current rules, if there's a benefit change or if there's a price change, it's going to take effect. A retailer must provide a small customer, which has a definition attached to it, but a small customer with a bill change alert in writing, using that customer's preferred communication method at least 5 business days before that benefit change or price change would take effect. So we're seeking stakeholder feedback as part of the issues paper consultation on does it make sense? Do you see any issue with extending that same obligation for embedded network customers as well? So I'll move us to the use of preferred communication methods, which I just mentioned, but this is one that seems to be a more straightforward potential reform to resolve, but again, let us know if you think differently or there's an aspect of it we may not have considered. That is important feedback to us when we're developing options and preferred options when we come to a draft stage of the code. So currently, some parts of the code require a retailer to use a customer's preferred method of communication, post, email, etc. Some parts, that's Part 6, which is to do with assistance for residential customers, either in or anticipating payment difficulties. Part 10, which is disconnection of premises. Those parts don't require a retailer to use preferred method of communication. So we think that there's a scope there or potential there to require a retailer to use a customer's preferred method for those 2 areas as well. We recognise, we want to allow for flexibility. Say if a customer's not contactable with their preferred method, that other methods could then be used. But we think that's a more straightforward reform, but please let us know if you don't think that's the case in any sort of future submission you make. And then the final aspect of this theme, there are 1 or 2 smaller ones in the paper, but this one clarifying timelines for compliance with certain obligations. This may be a more straightforward potential change as well, but there are a couple of places in the code that have a sequence of events set out, and they rely on a retailer doing something immediately is the word that's used, and immediately is sort of difficult as a term in terms of knowing if you're complying as a retailer, or knowing even how you interpret that, because immediately for one person may mean in that hour, on that same day, perhaps the next working day, it may mean different people. So we're simply looking at whether or not immediately would be changed to within one business day, which seemed to be a reasonable sort of proxy for using the word immediately. Again, we're open to hearing if you think that is reasonable, or may that cause any sort of unforeseen issues we're not aware of. And then the second aspect of just being clearer about timelines is related to customers receiving a disconnection warning notice before disconnection. So the code currently just says after the disconnection of the warning notice, so just after the disconnection of the warning notice, and then it sets out a sequence of events, but it doesn't have a timeline or concept the customer has received that warning notice. So the code could be amended just to recognize and have a concept that the disconnection warning notice must be received or deemed to be received before that sort of disconnection sequence continues. So it's not just sending, it is received or deemed to be received by a customer. So we are seeking some feedback on like how practical that is, or how that may work in practice, the best way of sort of approaching that. That draws us to a close on our content that we wanted to share with this group today. If this has piqued your interest, if you're interested in looking further at the issues we've talked about, there's our issues paper, which is available on our website, or there's the Engage Victoria web link at the bottom there of that slide. If you'd like to give us feedback, please share your views with us as part of the submission. Feedback is particularly helpful. All your experiences is invaluable. We have an Engage Vic survey, which is designed specifically to capture if you're a consumer or representing consumers. You may be interested in sharing your experiences of being an energy customer, an energy consumer, and that'll help support our review. But any feedback particularly that helps us understand what are the barriers or costs or benefits of potential reforms, what is it that makes a reform workable or not workable, or perhaps it's in practice, sounds like a great idea but it's impractical for some reasons. That's very useful feedback for us. Similarly, that feedback about consumers' experiences, challenges, preferences is useful through the Engage Vic survey. Be a useful way to capture that. And you may also have thoughts how to address an issue, how to word certain clauses even. Perhaps you have experience in other regulations or codes elsewhere that would be useful to add to our thinking when approaching problems that may occur in other states or other codes. Our consultation period's open on this paper till the 19th of July. Remain open for you to reach out. I think we've got some details, yes, on that slide about energy reform mailbox monitored by the team daily. If you wish to reach out, have another conversation or a meeting to talk about your thoughts or any issues that you've seen today or in the issues paper, you'd like to sort of go a little deeper on, we're very happy to have those conversations and hear your views and experiences. Finally, and I will stop talking, we've got the next step slide here, which essentially is just sending out some things I probably already said today, but that our issues paper consultation is open until the 19th of July. Open to those sort of further meetings with you if you'd like to pursue that with us. And then our next steps are following consultation is going into that mode, understanding the feedback that we've heard, developing options, testing options, and understanding the potential impacts of those options to go out with the draft decision, which is calling regulatory impact statement, considering what is our preferred option for these issues that have come through our consultation process. So I'm going to pause there. I I think we're moving to our Q&A section. I think there's been a couple of questions coming through the Q&A chat, so thank you very much. Please feel free to raise your hand or put questions in as we move into that time now. But thank you. I think I'm handing over to Nathan.
Thanks very much, Gareth, and thank you to everybody for your presentations today. I hope that they've been informative to everyone who's with us as part of this discussion. We're now moving into that Q&A session, and we have a couple that are already in the chat that we'll start to work through, but by all means, place more in, or if you'd like to say something, put your hand up. It might be useful as well in running through this session, having a better discussion if I ask some of the questioners to speak to their questions. We might get a bit more detail about them and might be in a better position to offer you some good guidance on how to go forward in this process, particularly as we're moving into the submission stage. So I'll start with Andrew Mayer, whose question came up first in my chat, who asks, how does the Commission see the requirement of not marketing VEU to customers that applies to retailers as well as APs interacting with the proposed ERCOP VEU information requirement? Andrew, if you're online and are comfortable, would you like to come online and speak to that one for just a second? I'll just give a few seconds in case you'd like to, but if not, what I will do then instead is I will, no, haven't got anything from Andrew.
Hey, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Andrew, please jump
sorry.
in. And if you are able to put your camera on, that makes it a lot easier for everybody else. I might also ask that we take the slides away so that we can see each other a bit better.
All right, I'm online now. Sorry, I was talking and I realised you couldn't hear me. Anyway, look, it's just an issue that is coming up a bit as retailers and our business also has AP functions within it as well from the VEU side of things. And the whole marketing thing is when you read the law says it applies to both providers as well as retailers based on the way the legislation is written, because we're subject to the VEU Act as most retailers are. Anyway, so the whole issue around trying to upsell customers about VEU thing is sort of flies into the face of that particular requirement that sort of says you can't do that unless the customer almost has to effectively go, see an advertisement and come to you about things that are available inside the VEU program. So it is my opinion, and I have asked the VEU side to get in contact to me about that, about how we would go about having conversations with customers about VEU activities when you're trying to help them use less power. So, and I think this is an area that we need to address. So you've got one side of the business, you guys, from saying, hey, push the VEU and get it out there and get customers using it. Flip side is we've got the rule that says you can't market, or you can only market through certain processes with regards to the VEU. So we need to nail that down. That's all. That's where I was coming from.
Thank you very much for that, Andrew. Aaron, if it's okay, can I hand to you and ask for you to answer that question?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, and thanks, Nathan, for your question. I think it's a good point, and it's something worthwhile for us to unpack. Obviously, there's two parts here. I think the VEU prohibitions are really about unsolicited sales as the main harm that it's trying to address. In the flip side, the reforms that we're looking in the retail code are really about helping customers in payment difficulty to get energy efficiency help with if that's appropriate to them as well. So I think we'd be really welcome to your views and others' views as well on how we unpack that. I think we all want a common goal of trying to assist the customer. So how we can do that in a practical way while balancing those harms is the key part, I think, that we'll need to work through.
Yeah. Oh, can I also say, though, look, the majority of our customers are actually business customers, so payment difficulty doesn't align with that.
That's a good point.
The same thing applies, though. We're trying to get businesses to use less power and help them with their affordability, their ability to run their businesses more affordably and keep their costs down. Which and that's the other side of it. How do we, as a retailer, there's all these written and unwritten requirements to help customers with that sort of thing. Flip side to it is pretty black and white rules that talk about marketing and all that sort of stuff. Now, I understand, it's about door knocking, but it's also about telephone calls, and it's unclear if you're you can very clearly see that if you're speaking to a customer who might have rung you, if you start talking to them about those things, then that's unsolicited. So, or can be viewed as unsolicited. So can you even bring up discussing replacing a gas hot water unit with a heat pump system without potentially breaching that requirement? So, and I think it can be easily defined and sorted out. It just hasn't been.
Yeah, and welcome
what
to
is
the
and what is not unsolicited. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what is the retailer's requirement under that? So anyway, happy to help unpack that. And in fact, I'd like to get that sorted before we rewrite the code, because it's an issue now, not so much as an issue. It's an issue potentially can be addressed in the ERCOT, but I'd like to get it resolved a bit more clearly now.
Thanks, Andrew.
All right, thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you very much, Aaron, for that answer. I'll move on to the next question now, which is, what is the rationale behind wanting to align with better bills? Do the ESC have a preference on partial, full, or no alignment? I'll just say at this stage that the ESC doesn't have a particular preference with one outcome over the other. What I can also say is that one of the things that we've observed is, as you have different jurisdictions in Australia, but you have businesses operate across both of them, sometimes there are opportunities for alignments between rules in different jurisdictions, and sometimes that's of benefit to consumers. At other times it's not, and at other times it's not worth doing. And so one of the reasons we've put this question up is we've seen what's going on in various jurisdictions, and we wanted to give, as part of this review, the opportunity to stakeholders to consider what their perspectives are on this possibility and to let us know as part of this process. McFarlane, I hope that answers your question, but before I jump to the next one, if you want to jump in and say something further, here's the opportunity. Just give you another couple of seconds in case you need to push mute or come online.
Can you hear me?
I can. Please jump in.
Hi, sorry, my name's Shelby from Shell Energy.
Oh, hi, Shelby. And Shelby, if you're willing to put your camera on, that would really help everybody, but if not, we understand.
Hello. Yeah, no, thanks. That answered my question. I was just wanting to understand a bit more because what was said was essentially what was in the paper. So thank you for providing further rationale.
Not a problem. Thank you very much for jumping in and being part of the conversation. Now, our next question in the chat is, have changes been considered to help or incentivize customers in embedded networks to reduce energy consumption? Can you see potential for this? Now, I think that one's come from Jim Crossthwaite. And Jim, I can see your camera's come on. So would you like to talk to that a little bit further?
Yes, it's related to energy performance in embedded networks. I'm not an expert on embedded networks at all, but I'm very interested in energy performance and would just like to know the potential for the code to help incentivize people in embedded networks to improve energy efficiency. Because I know that, if I've got it right, people may have less control over their system than otherwise in an embedded network, and so what can be done through the code to give more incentives and information as well, enabling people to reduce their energy bills, basically.
Thank you very much for that, Jim. I suppose, as I think about it, there are a number of things that have been done in the embedded network space historically. There's the introduction, the Victorian government held a review a while ago, and there was through that the introduction of the general exemption order. And a key component of the general exemption order is that for new embedded networks after a certain date, effectively they need to run on 100% renewable energy, with a component of that generated on site and a component of that taken from off-site renewable sources. Whilst there are limitations on the extent of choice and various other things that people within embedded networks can have, they're still able to access things like energy efficiency and various other advice that's more generically put out. If there are any specific proposals that you and your organisation think should be considered for further work in relation to embedded networks coming through the Energy Retail Code of Practice, we'd more than welcome hearing those, and we'll consider them as part of this process. Just a small framework thing to keep in mind, the Energy Retail Code of Practice is structured to place obligations on providers, whether that's retailers or embedded network operators, for how they interact with consumers. And so any incentives or ideas that you have to incentivize customers should really be framed in that context of understanding that it's an obligation on the retailer or whoever is the service provider and how that might work. I hope that's useful and it gives you a good answer to your question.
Thank you.
Is there anything further?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's
All
good.
right, thank you. Thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate it. With that, I'll move to the next question, which I have from Michelle Badkin, which is, will the update include a definition of deemed to be received in relation to disconnection notices for clarity? So Michelle, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was just the change from issuing to deemed to have been received. Like, obviously, will there be a definition within the ERCOP so that the retailers can define what our obligations are there? If you send something by post, if that's the customer's preferred method of communication, how do you then determine that the customer has received it? So is there going to be a definition included, was just my question.
I'll just restart again. Look, thank you very much for that question, Michelle. It's a really good one, and topics like this in implementation are very important so that everybody has clarity on what's required of them and people know what the rights that they have as consumers are as well. So thank you very much for that. I will say that right now at this early stage of the ERCOP, we're not seeking to flag we'll definitely do this or we'll definitely do this. We're providing information about the issues that are at play as we have seen them so far. And we're looking to provide people with opportunities to, if they want something in the ERCOP or they think that one of the issues that we've mentioned or perhaps even a different issue needs to be handled in a particular way, to make a submission that says so. So what I would say to you is that if you consider that the way in which these things works requires a definition of deemed to be received and why you think that needs to work in a particular way, we'd really like to hear that from you, particularly with an understanding of what sort of happens practically on the ground, and so that you can talk to us about how that's implemented and how we might work that. I think I might pause there because I do also have a feeling that there are some deemed to be received provisions in one of our codes of practice already, and that might provide you with a model to think about, but hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you. Yep.
All right, thank you very much, Michelle. Now I'm just continuing to move through the chat, and the next question I have, if you'll excuse me, is from Georgia Newland. Whilst removal of newspapers for notice of price changes is welcomed, is the Commission aware this would also require an amendment to the Gas Industry Act? Georgia, do you want to speak any further to that question? Feel free to turn on your camera, come off mute. Just give you a second on that one.
Hi there. No, I don't really need to speak to it any further. I was just working through the Gas Industry Act on another matter the other day, and I noticed newspapers is called out there, so just wanted to flag it because obviously it's a separate amendment to amending the code. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
All right. Well, thank you very much for pointing that out, Georgia. We are aware that there are particular provisions in the Gas Industry Act, and we'll need to negotiate them. Obviously, Parliament has control over that Act and we have control over the Code of Practice, and there are limitations within that space. But modernising the forms of notification to people as a general policy idea is something that we do want to consider. There may be a series of limitations or one or two that means that we can't do absolutely everything that we'd like to. But the extent that we can consider what are the appropriate ways to notify people, what are the mediums that are available, and the ways in which we can do that to make that easier for people is certainly something we want to consider. So if there are any views about, even if we can't get all of the way there by ourselves, that you could contribute, I think that that would be a useful contribution to the discussion. Thank you very much for that question. Is there any further follow-up from you before I move to the next one? All right, thank you very much. The next one, again from Andrew, I think it's Andrew once again. Is the Commission be providing all the materials that they want to be provided to customers? This will make it simpler for retailers to meet their obligations. Andrew, do you want to expand on that one, please?
Okay, apologies for my grammar when typing that out. Didn't reread it enough. Anyway, so basically there's a lot of discussion in this about putting obligations on retailers to provide more detailed information, specific information to customers in a number of different circumstances through the presentation, which, is certainly something that, makes sense to get that information to the customer. The issues that I have seen, and I've been doing this for a very long time, is that information and how that, the ability to get that information, especially for smaller retailers, is quite difficult. The quality is different from retailer to retailer because they've got different experiences and all sorts of things. The thing that I see that would help the most with a lot of this stuff is that if the Commission provided information on energy efficiency or a website or a government website that had that information that we could refer customers to make sure that those customers are getting that information. It also provides a base for training our own staff and discussing those things with customers. So that's just that's where I was coming from there. I think there's a lot of these obligations is that there's more and more being thrown on retailers, but there's not a lot of necessarily support from the regulators and the government who have also accessed this information to help frame that information in a way that is neutral and can be provided to customers easily by large and small retailers.
Thank you very much for expanding on that, Andrew. So if I understand correctly, what you're suggesting is that from your organisation's perspective, there is a role for government in providing information that provide clarity in a more neutral way than across industry as to what some topics might be, for example, energy efficiency. I understand from my colleagues that Sustainability Victoria may provide some information in the space that you're discussing at the moment. If that's a topic you'd like us to take up through the ERCOP review, or there are specific suggestions that you'd make, and I imagine you're going to make a submission already, we'd like to hear that and we'll consider that as part of the process. Now,
Thanks.
As I look through the chat, I don't see any further questions at the moment. Therefore, I'm going to ad-lib for a few seconds just while we give everybody the opportunity who wants to put any last questions in or to raise their hand to do so. I hope that the presentations you've received today and the Q&A session that we've had just now have been useful to you. I don't see any further questions, so at this point I'm inclined to draw the matter to a close and thank you all. So before I leave you for the final time, thank you everybody for giving us your time today to give up an hour or so of your time to listen to this process at this early stage. I know is valuable to all of you, and we appreciate you providing both the time and the expertise that you have available, for listening to our presentations, for giving us your views and for asking your questions. From here, we will continue with the consultation process and move into the submission stage. We hope to hear from you again through that, and we will consider all of those submissions in detail as part of this process, which goes on over the next few months. Thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best for the rest of the day. Thank you. Bye-bye.